But it's great to have you all here, as always, for the monthly Mad Tea Party.
Hey,
So that's how I'm feeling today. Oh, yeah. And just jumping in to join our friend Alice on her adventure here. So as she's going along, she comes upon a very big house and walks in to find the Duchess in the midst of a very strange scene. So, kitchen is filled with smoke. The Duchess is nursing a baby. The cook is stirring a cauldron. The baby is sneezing because, the room is filled with smoke and there's like a huge amount of pepper in the smoke and it's very irritating. And the cook starts randomly just throwing instruments, pots, pans, flat irons at the Duchess and the baby. Go figure. Who knows why? Um, the Duchess starts singing a lullaby to the baby and then violently starts throwing the baby up and down. So now, Alice is watching this whole scene, which is bonkers, and sitting back and going like, what? But, to these people, this is just a normal Tuesday, right? This is just what they do. And that sort of made me think about just thinking back to my childhood and how, you grow up thinking that your home or your family is normal. And I use this word normal a lot, and I'm going to put it in air quotes once, and then you understand the air quotes are inferred from here on after. But we grow up and our family is what it is. Our reality is what it is. And it is until we go and visit other people's families that we start questioning that a little bit because we walk into these other people's families and they do things differently. Some of their habits are very, may seem kind of odd. Or maybe their habits make us question our own family's behaviors and go like, well, maybe that's a little odd. But either way, it's kind of when we start to have this inkling that maybe people live in different versions of reality, you know? Um, so, you know, if we were invisible observers, that would even be probably another level of of depth into a different reality, right? Like, as of course, people are on good behavior when they're, inviting guests over. But if you walked in and they didn't realize you were there, what might you stumble upon? Likewise, if someone walked in on you in your reality, what might they see? So we live in these kind of reality bubbles, but it's almost like we have our own virtual reality helmets on in a way, and we're kind of in our family virtual realities. We go out into the world, but we still have the virtual reality helmet on to a degree. So back to Alice, she first encounters the beloved Cheshire cat here at the Duchess's house. Um, and she then runs after she runs out of the house because it's bonkers. She runs into the cat again. He's hanging out in the tree, as cats do. And they're chatting, and she says, I don't want to go among mad people. And the cat says, well, we're all mad here. I'm mad. You're mad. Alice says, well, how do you know I'm mad? And he says, well, you must be, or you wouldn't have come here. That struck me because it actually made me think of the famous George Bernard Shaw quote, where he says, the longer I live, the more convinced I am that this planet is used by other planets as a lunatic asylum. Because if you look around at what we consider normal or what we consider reality, some of it's a little bonkers. Um, so the Cheshire Cat, of course, is one of those iconic characters in the book that, he's probably one of the most referenced characters from the book. Um, and he's a representation of the whimsical, unpredictable, and mysterious nature of Wonderland. He's very mysterious in the way he kind of disappears. He fades in and out into some other dimension. Who knows what dimension? Who knows where he's going? Sometimes you only see his mouth, and the rest of him is gone. But he still has that grin, right? Like all cats do, self-satisfied, very pleased with himself. Now, anyone who's been around cats know that they can often have that kind of expression, like pleased with themselves. I mean, cats are the greatest comic relief in the world, I think. They can just be completely goofy, silly, mischievous, curious. Curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought him back. But I often wonder if my cat looks at me as if I'm the mad one, right? I mean, there he is, lounging on the sofa cushion, sunning himself, meditating, and I'm running around like a crazy person, like trying to get all this stuff done, right? Or I'm staring for hours into a screen, like clicking on buttons. And he's probably looking at me like, why are you wasting all this wonderful sunshine here? And you're just like staring at a screen. What's up with that? Or why are you wasting all this time that could be spent relaxing, enjoying life, playing? He may have a point. But then again, he has the privilege of basking in the sun because someone else is paying his bills, right? But back to the Cheshire Cat, as he points out, we are all mad here, which also brought to mind a couple of other quotes. Einstein, I love this one. Reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. And Sydney Banks, one of my favorites. Everyone is a little bit schizophrenic. And, we just, there are those people who are a little bit more so that we actually label and treat as such. So, but we're all a little bit schizophrenic because, I mean, really, what is normal? Who is normal? And what is reality, really? The Cheshire Cat has this great example pointing out his madness, right? He says, a dog growls when it's angry and wags its tail when it's pleased. I growl when I'm happy, when I'm pleased, and wag my tail when I'm angry. Therefore, I'm mad. I mean, I actually love that little flip, right? Because it's like we can look at some things happening in our own culture that we do, which I'd say is pretty backwards. But we exist within a paradigm that is known to us. I mean, it's, a lot of us wouldn't call it normal or sane in a number of ways, but still there are aspects of it that we don't question because it's just, again, it's just normal. It's normalized, or we have assumptions, unconscious assumptions that this is just how it is. So we're all a little bit complicit in the madness, or we are all a lot complicit in the madness because we were born into it. The human condition and the modern version of the human condition, which is the 21st century late capitalism version of the human condition. For example, we humans, we put all of our attention into these like small little devices here for little dopamine hits, but we can get so mesmerized, we like literally like we can just live hours in this alternative reality here. Meanwhile, life is happening over here, and our precious life moments are just being like sucked into the algorithm. You know, that's kind of crazy if you think about it. Um, we also spend most of our time on various activities in order to get more of this invisible substance called money, right? This invisible substance is what allows us to keep living on the planet. You know, it doesn't really exist, but we all want more of it. It only exists in our imagination. I mean, we have like little pieces of paper or plastic or like pixels on a screen, but where is it? I mean, that's a magic trick if there ever was one. Like that's a magic trick. But hey, we're all buying into this imaginary money game thing, and I don't know how to get out of it, but it seems kind of crazy. But if you think about it, like if the grid really went down, we'd all just be sitting around with a bunch of stuff, because there's no money anywhere. Actually, one of my colleagues was talking about that. She was in Florida last fall with the hurricane. When the hurricanes were happening, she got stuck there. And she said, my money was useless because what we needed was gas, and there was no gas at the stations. They were out. So what money? I could have all the money in the world and it wouldn't get me out of the hurricane. So there are definitely limits to this invisible magic stuff as to what it can do. Well, we've built an entire civilization that is dependent upon energy sources that are going to soon disappear. I could call that kind of madness. We've thought a little bit about a plan B, but not too much. We're still pretty invested in these like cartels that are, keeping the fossil fuels going. So, I don't know what's going to happen there, but everybody's just kind of like, la, 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 we'll see. We'll see. The summers keep getting hotter. So we burn more fossil fuels to keep us cooler. And then the summers then continue to get even hotter as a result. You could say that's a little bit mad. We accumulate tangibles in the hopes that they will give us the intangibles we truly seek: security, love, happiness. The big house will make me feel secure. The car will make me feel happy. The expensive perfume will get me love. But, as we know, you can't get happiness or fulfillment out of a bar of gold or a house or a car or a collection of Limoges china or whatever it is. Like, ain't gonna happen. We have outlawed slavery, but many people in the United States make no more than $7.25 an hour. So is it really outlawed, or is it technically outlawed, but it's wage slavery? I don't know. Same thing. We draw lines on the land and we say, this is mine. But really, does the land belong to us, or do we belong to it? Because ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I think we really actually belong to the land. And this is kind of a funny game we play. Our economy is based on a made-up story about scarcity in which promotes hoarding, which then results in scarcity. Look at that. We are so consumed with our daily to-do list and being productive that we have forgotten about the awe and wonder of existence. Plain and simple. Now, when I say we, of course, I'm talking about culture at large. I'm, realize that there are many people who do question these norms and assumptions all the time. But in some ways, we're all trapped in the result of these assumptions, right? We're all trapped in the paradigm. However, when we are able to even look at them and just, poke holes in these assumptions, that is when we have the possibility of freedom. And when I talk about freedom, I mean mental freedom, right? Like a paradigm is really kind of a mental prison in a way. Or it can be, it doesn't have to be, right? Like a paradigm can be very freeing, but if we're living in one that is keeping us confined, then seeing outside of it or beyond it is the way to free ourselves from it. So questioning and having curiosity about any of the assumptions. And a lot of times, again, we don't see them because we're like fish in water. This is just our reality. It's our normal. But it's all perception, so this is just the way we've been conditioned to see things. And, it was different before in history. It will be different again. This is kind of the blip we live in which things are very specifically this way. But we are living in a paradigm that is dominated by, typically white European patriarchal values and systems. And, again, because we're kind of fish in water, we don't see all the ways that manifests. And just that one example, a lot of those examples come out of that, but the one example about property is a very specific one you can point to and go, when the colonists came over here, the Native Americans, the indigenous people, they didn't get it. They didn't understand this property ownership thing. It didn't make any sense to them. What do you mean? You own the land? Because they understood that it was a reciprocal relationship. There was no ownership. We were part of the land and the land is part of us. But again, this is where we are now with these assumptions. So I'm going to throw out a little excerpt that you are all familiar with here, a little quote. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for. No religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will be as one. So, of course, John Lennon is, he's looking outside of the concepts, the constructs, to say that we've all invented, right? To say, what if? Because actually they don't exist, except for we've agreed contractually that they do. But we've invented these concepts and these constructs to make us feel safe and secure, right? That's really why they exist. Heaven, countries, religion, possessions. And yet the irony or the madness is that these illusions of safety and control and security have only resulted in war, greed, hunger, and mental illness. So I think we're maybe going about it the wrong way, you know? But so, okay, we're all mad here. So how do we stop the madness? I mean, that's the question, right? Well, we can't stop it exactly, right? But we can see outside of it. And Buckminster Fuller had a good quote too. He said, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model and make the existing model obsolete." And you could argue that some people have fought reality, but you could look at someone like, say, Gandhi or MLK, who protested. They protested the status quo. But they also did that. They weren't exactly fighting it, right? They were just standing in their beliefs and, moving forward, taking steps into this new reality that they were creating. And so it was, even though there was some conflict, obvious conflict, they were creating the new reality. That's what they were doing. So instead of putting your energy into fighting the old paradigm, fighting the old reality, put your energy into creating the new one. And so we can all use our mad genius to envision a different reality, a different future. And then we can take steps within our control to move in that direction, to make that happen, even if it's small steps, you know. I mean, every day we have the choice to either buy into the old paradigm or to start to poke holes into it and see, like, what other possibilities can bubble up. And of course, there are other people who are doing that. You can tap into other people's new realities. We can be free in any moment if we understand that it's all made up, it's all constructs and concepts. The only actual reality is, physical reality. I mean, we live in the result of the constructs and the concepts, right? The result is what's happening in the world, in the physical world. But we can also be free by thinking differently, and then acting differently. So yes, we are witnessing and participating in the result of these thoughts and beliefs. But if we envision a different reality, we're not just dreamers. You may say I'm a dreamer, but actually, we're creating a new reality. That's what we're doing in the way that we make meaning in our lives and the actions we take and how that ripples outward and how that affects other people and influences other people. And even in the businesses we support, right? Wherever we channel our energy, we're giving life to that. Creative states, right? Creative states are the antidote to anxiety and powerlessness. So, letting your mad genius flow through you, whatever that looks like, whether that's creating art and beauty, whether that's giving time, energy, and money to causes and businesses that are moving in the right direction. It can also mean love thy neighbor. Now, think about some of the mad geniuses throughout history. And when I say mad genius, I don't mean they were all mentally ill, right? We have the Van Gogh examples, and apparently Nikola Tesla was a little bit, could have his moments, but they were geniuses, right? I mean, they definitely created paradigm shifts. But then you have people like Copernicus, right? Talk about a paradigm shift. He flip the script on what's the sun? The sun is actually the center of the solar system, not the Earth. And he basically changed the whole way we view ourselves as a species. And he was condemned by the church. He was not imprisoned. I was not sure about that, but I checked it out. Galileo later on continued this argument, pushed up against the status quo, which of course at the time was the church. He was basically convicted of being a heretic, but he got house arrest. It's not the worst. It's not the worst thing. He didn't end up being burned at the stake or anything like that. So, um, Albert Einstein. I mean, if you look at the picture of Albert Einstein, you think mad genius, right? I mean, he just embodies that. But he shifted a paradigm, and these are of course scientific revolutions that change the way we see ourselves in the universe. But you have people like Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, MLK. Of course, he had a dream, and they saw the new reality, that they saw that it was possible, and then they took steps towards it. And then you have people like Martha Graham and Georgia O'Keeffe and John Lennon and Bob Marley, who are just kind of creating and speaking and expressing their truth and challenging the status quo through the work that they're doing. And that list goes on and on and on and on. So you don't have to be a mad genius. You just have to express your creativity and move your energy in the direction that feels good and towards the causes that feel good to you, or that are, feel like they're moving in the direction that we want the world to go in. And maybe somebody will call you a dreamer, or maybe they'll call you crazy. But, a lot of those people were called crazy, right? That's kind of the people who challenge the status quo are often called crazy. But are they really crazy, or who's actually crazy? So you don't have to be a genius or a revolutionary to start poking holes in the paradigm and following the steps towards the reality you want to create, because you bring your own unique way of doing that into the world just by being you and showing up in whatever way that makes sense to you. So we all may be mad here, but our madness doesn't have to be our downfall, right? It can be our gift if we use it in a creative way to create positive change, to create new realities, new paradigms. So, what are some ways that you can let your creative genius flow through?